Alright, today we're going to talk about FlightOne Falco X. We're going to show you where you can download it. We're not going to go through the setup because there's other videos on it out there, but we are going to look through the OSD screens, and we're also going to show some flight footage from what I'm getting on the different presets. So to use FlightOne, you have to have a FlightOne flight control board. If you go to shop.flightone.com, you can see all the options here. Now, for normal FlightOne, you can just use any of the boards like this Revolt V2. I don't believe that has the OSD chip, but of course for Falco X, you do need to have an OSD chip on board. So you got to make sure it's one of these like the Revolt OSD or Millivolt OSD, because all the setup and everything for Falco X is through the OSD, which is really cool. I have to say that's my favorite feature about it. Just the simplicity of, you flash it on. You have to flash it on. I understand that with a computer, but once it's flashed on, you're setting it all up through the OSD, and just the steps of doing that, they really spent some time. So hats off to them for getting that all set up and going through the programming for that. Just the complexity of what it has to do there and all the steps, and it really works very well. The only thing that you have to make sure, of course, is that your receiver is connected to the TX pin on UART1, and as long as that's set up, then the rest of downstream stuff should be in good shape. Since we're specifically talking Falco X on this, you would go to flightone.com and /beta, and you can download the bin file to use then the FlightOne configurator to flash that Falco to the flight control board. After that, you can see this little video down here below where you can watch how to get that set up. I'm not going to go through the setup because there's other videos on that out there. If you would just type in Falco setup on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find a video resource there. Once it is all set up, these would be the OSD screens you'd be presented with and then to use for any of the setups. What's really nice here is these presets. It's on the first screen, so you have 1 through 8. So little tip, to get into the OSD on Falco, you need to hold both sticks down to the lower left. So it might be right since this is all backwards to you, but it'd be the lower left. So holding the sticks this way, both down to the lower left. You have to hold them there for a minute, and that would enter into the OSD screen. Then you can just use the yaw to the right to go through screens 1 through 8, and then you use your roll stick on the right to increase or decrease values or select a different value. So you have the presets up here, which are the presets for PIDs and also your filters, and then also right down here you can click into the roll, pitch, or yaw. You can just kind of cycle that access, and then you can change your PID values here and change some other things for sim mode, so on and so forth. So the first one I flew, and I'll show a video here, is the default. The Blackbird tune and filter setup, that was really good. I've word on the street that is probably the best, so give that definitely a try as your second. I would definitely do the default first, fly, make sure everything's copacetic, make sure your motor temps are good, and then I would definitely give the Blackbird DS32 a shot. Second screen here is the rates. Again, you have the Blackbird, and then you have your access here for roll, pitch, and yaw. You can see it's set to yaw here, and then your different rates. I did want to mention one thing about the rates. FlightOne has this calculator here. You can go to flightone.com /rates, and you can enter in. The default here is FlightOne to Betaflight to FlightOne, and then I'm used to my Betaflight rates. And talking to Preston, honestly, a FlightOne, they're in the business of selling hardware. So obviously a benefit to their hardware is you can use their firmware, but as long as you're buying their hardware, Preston doesn't care if you're using Betaflight. It works for Betaflight, it works for FlightOne. That's what I really like about their hardware. Also, I like the plug connectors. Transitioning into racing or you're into racing and you're not getting FlightOne gear, whether you're flying FlightOne, Falco X, or Betaflight, it's definitely something to think about. Back to the rates, putting in my 1.3 and my Expo 0.3 and my Super Rate 0.75, and then hit submit. What it's telling me for Falco X is I should have a rate of 260, 60, and 290 for the rate, Expo, and Acro Plus. That is the Willy rates in the presets. If I go back to here, this presets right here, that would be the Willy rates, and I use those, and I don't think that that's an exact match. They were way slower than what I'm used to in Betaflight. So what I found was the Blackbird was really the closest that I was used to that with that 1.3, the 0.3 Expo and the 0.75. So I would recommend if you are using something close to that in Betaflight to try the Blackbird preset and then just take the Expo. I think the Expo default is 40. I felt like that was a little snappy yet and not exactly the same as 0.3 Expo and Betaflight, so I bumped that up to 60. I think the 60 is about right, but the other two, the overall roll rate wasn't fast enough with the wheelie rates. So you'll see that in the first video where I kind of do a first roll and I only went like a quarter into it because it's the overall degrees per second roll rate wasn't as fast. Also on this screen you can see the deadband setting, smoothing amount, so on and so forth. Next is the filter setup, so that you can see that the Blackbird's running 2 low-pass filters in series with a FIR2 filter and a frequency filter, which is like the PT1 filter. So both of these, as far as I'm aware, are very close to first order low-pass filters, which is what the PT1 filter is in Betaflight. So it's just 2 of those in series. You can see it 150 and then 300, which is about right. You usually double up if you're running things in cascade. It's usually you set your first one and then the second one is usually double the frequency. And then here I also like this as well, the bi-quad at 200 hertz. I can see why this is a good one. In this one they have the dynamic auto aliasing disabled for that preset, so I left that. I didn't mess with any of the other things. Here you have TPA curves in screen setup 4, and you can see here on the P term, which is the first one you get to, they're after 60% throttle down to 100%. You can see they're going 90% P, 80%. So whatever the P value is, it's dropping it to it's dropping off 10%. Now it's dropping off 20%. Now it's dropping off 30%, 40%, and 50%. So at 100% throttle, you're getting half of your P term gain. Same with D term here. Now here it's at 80%, 90%, 100%. It's dropping 10, 20, 30%. So that all makes sense to me, especially with D term. You definitely want to chop that off at the upper throttle limits to get your max throttle, because D really causes a ton of vibrations typically at full throttle, which will limit, you won't hear the motors scream as much. They won't get up to full RPM, so chopping that down definitely makes sense. Same thing occurs in Betaflight with TPA. There, though, you can only chop P term or D term. You can do D term alone, which is the default, or P and D both, but they can only be chopped the same amount. So FlightOne is more customizable on how you can implement custom TPA curves, and you can see the customizability here that you have. So you can see those are the defaults there. Nice feature. It's all again in the OSD. Next screen here is Coupa mode for flip over and turtle mode, and then don't forget to go into your setup modes here. I didn't show that screen because I didn't do that yet, but you can go into there and then set up your toggle for having your motors beep or whatnot if you crash the quad. You got your voltage OSD set up, and you can see the other items here for if you're going to use BL, Heli 32 telemetry, amp draw changes, some font things, and then if you want your single or double arm. That's something with FlightOne and Falco. It's a double arm, so you'd have to flip the switch twice. Takes some getting used to. I usually have 2 switches on my radio I have to use, so I set that to single, and that's where that's at. Screen setup number 5. Just setting up what you have for your VTX. The next one is setting your ESC protocol, and then it's if your motors, this is if they're reversed or not. You can see mine were all set up to be normal here. That's just using the setup process. I think they're all set to normal here because in my ESC firmware, in the BL Heli, I have them reversed within there for the certain motors that need to be reversed, so these all then show as normal. You got your idle speed, motor stop, things of that nature. And then after that, it's save and exit. Okay, so with that brief overview, let's go into some flight footage. On the first one, I did the default preset, and then the second one after that was Blackbird. My overall impressions, again, I really think they're onto something with this OSD setup. I really do like that process. The default preset flew okay. The Blackbird flew much better, so definitely check out the Blackbird. It was very smooth, and prop wash was pretty good, but it was still there. They all still have prop wash. That's, I think, just physical limitations. but the ease of setup and then hit that preset and it flies that well right off the bat, I think that's great. I think it's, you know, the real advantage to FlightOne is the presets, the built-in presets. Those are awesome. And in general, I'm pretty pleased with just the Blackbird default preset as is. Okay, everybody, so that is Falco X. Drop any questions, comments below. Thanks again, and I hope this helped.